The stars were cold and silent when the Valoran warship found the small human vessel drifting near the edge of contested space. Admiral Kira stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Silence, watching the capture on the main screen. Her gray skin reflected the blue light of the displays, and her 4 eyes narrowed with mild interest. Humans were rare in this sector. They kept to themselves, mostly trading with a few species, but never causing trouble. This one had wandered too far from home. "Bring the pilot to Detention Block 7, she ordered. Her voice was flat and emotionless, like all Valoran voices. Her species had evolved beyond what they considered the weakness of feeling. Logic ruled them. Cold, perfect logic. The human was dragged onto the ship within the hour. His name, according to the vessel's registration, was Doan. He was young by human standards, perhaps 28 cycles of their planet. He had black hair that fell into his eyes and a face that showed no fear as the guards pushed him through the corridors. This surprised the soldiers. Most species trembled when captured by the Valoran Empire. Most species begged. Duhan did not beg. He looked around the ship with wide, curious eyes, studying the architecture, the lighting, the way the metal walls curved into the ceiling. When they passed a window showing the stars outside, he actually stopped walking to look at it. A guard shoved him forward, and he stumbled, but did not fall. "Nice ship," he said in broken Valoran. He had learned a few words from trade routes. "Very clean." "My ship is not so clean." The guards did not respond. They were not supposed to speak with prisoners. Admiral Kira met him in the detention chamber. She stood behind a barrier of energy that hummed softly in the quiet room. Doan was placed in a chair, his hands bound behind his back. He looked up at her with an expression she could not read. "You've entered Valoran space without permission," she said. "This is a crime punishable by death or service. You will tell us why you are here. You will tell us about Earth's defenses. You will tell us everything we wish to know." Doan blinked at her. Then he laughed. The sound was strange in the sterile room. Valorans did not laugh. They had removed that response from their biology centuries ago, considering it inefficient. But this human sat there, bound and captured, facing death, and he laughed like he had heard a funny joke. "I'm a cargo pilot," he said when he finished. "I deliver food and medicine to colonies. I got lost because my navigation system broke. I don't know anything about Earth's defenses. I barely know how to fix my own toilet." Kira studied him. She had interrogated many species in her long career. She knew when creatures were lying. This human did not seem to be lying, but that did not matter. Protocol demanded a full interrogation. "We shall see," she said. The interrogation began the next day. The Valorans had many methods for extracting information. They started with the simple ones: bright lights, loud noises, no sleep. These methods broke most species within hours. Doan lasted 3 days. On the 4th day, they moved to physical methods. A soldier struck him across the face. Blood sprayed from his lip. Doan spat it onto the floor, wiped his mouth with his shoulder, and looked up at the soldier. "You should meet my grandmother," he said. "She hits harder than you." The soldier hit him again. And again. Doan's face swelled. His eye closed. But he did not scream, did not cry, did not beg. He just kept making jokes that the Valorans did not understand. Admiral Kira ordered a full biological scan. When the results came back, she read them 3 times to make sure they were correct. Humans came from a planet called Earth. It was what galactic scientists called a death world. A planet so dangerous that life should not exist there at all. The gravity was heavy. The weather was violent. The planet had earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, and floods. It had predators on every continent, diseases in every ecosystem, and plants that produced poison, and yet humans had not only survived there, they had thrived. They had become the dominant species. They had spread across their entire planet and then reached for the stars. Their bodies, the scan revealed, were designed for punishment. Their bones healed after breaking. Their skin grew back after tearing. They could lose blood, lose limbs, lose organs, and still keep living. They felt pain but had evolved to push through it, to ignore it, to use it as fuel. This species, Kira said slowly, reading the report, should not exist. But they did exist. And one of them was sitting in her detention chamber, beaten and bleeding. And still making jokes. She went to see him again that night. He was alone in his cell, lying on the cold floor because they had not given him a bed. When she approached the barrier, he opened his one good eye and looked at her. "Back for more questions?" he asked. His voice was rough from thirst. They had not given him water either. "I've read about your planet," Kira said. "I've read about your history. Your people have suffered greatly. Wars, diseases, disasters. You nearly destroyed yourselves many times." Doan nodded slowly. "Yes, we are not perfect. We have made many mistakes, and yet you continue. Why?" The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling of his cell. When he spoke, his voice was different. Softer, sadder, because giving up is not in our nature. Because every time we fall, we get back up. Because we believe tomorrow can be better than today. He turned his head to look at her. And because we are too stubborn to die? Kira did not understand. Her species had evolved beyond stubbornness. They made logical choices based on probability and outcome. If a situation was hopeless, they accepted it. They did not waste energy fighting the inevitable. But humans, it seemed, did not believe in the inevitable. They fought against it. They raged against it. They looked death in the face and laughed. "You are strange creatures," she said. Doan smiled, though it must have hurt with his swollen face. "You have no idea." Kira returned to her quarters that night with a feeling she had not experienced in decades. She searched her memory for the correct word, the name for this cold sensation in her chest, this uncertainty in her. Thoughts, fear. The word was fear. She did not sleep well. The rumors spread through the eternal silence like smoke through air. Soldiers whispered in corridors. Officers spoke in quiet voices behind closed doors. Everyone on the ship knew about the human prisoner. Everyone knew he had been interrogated for 10 cycles now. And everyone knew that nothing was working. Yuna was a junior xenobiologist assigned to the ship's science division. Her job was to study alien species, to understand their biology, to find weaknesses that could be used against them. She was young for a Valoran scientist, only 80 cycles old, and she had never studied a human before. When Admiral Kira ordered her to examine the prisoner, she accepted the task with professional interest. That interest became something else when she reviewed the interrogation footage. She watched. Doan endure things that would kill a Valoran in minutes. Electric shocks. Temperature extremes. Physical trauma that left him bleeding on the floor. Any other species would have broken by now. Any other species would have told them everything, would have begged for mercy, would have given up the will to live. Duhan had not given up. He had not even come close. But what disturbed Yuna more than his resistance was his behavior between sessions. The cameras in his cell recorded everything. She watched him lie on the cold floor, his body covered in bruises and cuts, and she waited for him to cry. He did not cry. Instead, he sang. The songs were in his native language, words Yuna did not understand. But she could hear the melody, slow and sad sometimes, fast and cheerful other times. He sang to himself in the darkness, his voice rough and broken, and somehow he made the empty cell feel less cold. When he was not singing, he exercised. He called it push-ups, a strange movement where he lifted his body from the floor using only his arms. His broken ribs made him gasp with pain. Sometimes he collapsed and could not continue. But he always tried again the next day, and he talked to the guards. Even though they never responded, even though they were forbidden from speaking to him, he talked to them. He asked them about their families. He told them jokes. He commented on the weather, though there was no weather inside a spaceship. Most of the guards ignored him. A few started to smile when they thought no one was watching. Yuna found herself going to his cell one evening. She did not know why. She told herself it was for research. She stood behind the energy barrier, watching him sit in the corner with his eyes closed. "You are the scientist," he said, without opening his eyes. "I saw you watching on the cameras." Yuna was surprised. He had noticed. "Yes, I am studying you. Find anything interesting? She considered the question. You should be dead or broken. You are neither. Doan opened his eyes and looked at her. Despite everything they had done to him, despite the pain he must be feeling, there was still light in those eyes. Still life? Can I ask you a question? Una said. You can ask. I might not answer. Why do you laugh? Your situation is hopeless. You will never escape. You will likely die here. Why do you laugh? Dohan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft and serious. Because if I stop laughing, I might start screaming. And once I start screaming, I won't be able to stop. He paused. Laughter is how humans survive. It is how we keep the darkness away. When everything is terrible, we find something funny. When we want to give up, we make a joke. It does not fix anything, but it helps us keep going. Una did not understand. Her species had removed laughter from their biology. They had considered it useless. But watching this human use it as a weapon against despair, she wondered if they had made a mistake. She returned to her quarters and began researching human history. The galactic archives contained millions of records about the species. What she found kept her awake for 3 days. Humans had fought each other for their entire existence. They had wars that killed millions of their own kind. They had developed weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. They had built bombs that could end all life on their planet, and had actually used them twice. They had polluted their world, hunted animals to extinction, and nearly made themselves extinct through their own stupidity. But they had also done something else. Something no other species in the galaxy had ever done. They had fixed it. When their planet was dying, they changed. They cleaned their air and their water. They protected their animals. They turned their weapons into tools for peace. They looked at the destruction they had caused and said, no more. Una found records of human art, human music, human literature. She found stories of sacrifice and love, of heroes who gave their lives for strangers, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. She found something called poetry, words arranged in beautiful patterns that served no logical purpose, but somehow meant everything. And she found a concept that had no translation in the Valoran language, a word that humans use to describe their most powerful motivation. Spite the word meant continuing to live simply to deny your enemy satisfaction. It meant fighting when there was no hope of winning. It meant surviving just to prove that you could. Una thought about Doan in his cell, singing and exercising and making jokes. He knew he might die here. He knew he was alone. But he kept going anyway, not because he believed he would escape, but because giving up would mean they had won spite. What a terrifying word. She returned to his cell the next day, and the day after that, she brought him water when the guards were not looking. She brought him food that was not the nutritional paste they normally gave prisoners. She did not know why she was doing this. It was against regulations. It was illogical. But something about this human made her want to understand, made her want to help. Why are you being kind to me? Doan asked one evening why UNA did not have an answer. I do not know, she admitted. It is not logical. Doan smiled. It was a sad smile, tired and worn, but genuine. Most of the best things in life are not logical. That is what makes them beautiful. Una left that night with her mind full of questions. She had been raised to believe that logic was the highest virtue, that emotion was weakness, that feeling was failure. But this human, beaten and broken and alone, seemed more alive than any Valoran she had ever met. Perhaps, she thought, her species had been wrong about many things. Perhaps feeling was not weakness at all. Perhaps it was the greatest strength of all. She did not report her doubts to anyone. She kept them locked inside, growing in the darkness like seeds waiting for spring. But she knew, somehow, that everything was about to change. She just did not know how much. The distress signal had been received 14 days ago. Captain Sujin stood on the bridge of the Defiant Hope, staring at the star map that showed the location of the Valoran flagship. Her ship was small, a light cruiser with a crew of 42. The Eternal Silence was a massive warship with over 3,000 soldiers on board. By any logical measure, what she was planning was suicide. She did not care. Doan was one of hers. Not her crew, not directly, but he was human. He was alone. He was suffering. And she had sworn an oath when she became a captain. No human left behind, ever. Her first officer, Tai Wu, stood beside her with concern in his eyes. He was a tall man with gray hair and a calm voice. He had served with Sujin for 12 years. He knew when she had made up her mind about something. "The odds are not good," he said quietly. "We are outgunned 50-1. If they detect us, we will not survive." "And we won't let them detect us," Sujin replied. She turned to face her bridge crew. They were young, most of them. Young and scared and looking to her for answers. She gave them the only answer she had. "There is a man on that ship," she said. "A human being. He has been a prisoner for 2 weeks. I do not know what they have done to him, but I know he is still alive because his signal is still broadcasting. He is waiting for someone to come. We are going to be that someone." A young officer named Ga raised her hand. "Captain, how do we get on board without being seen?" Sujin smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a hunter. "There is a debris field 3 light minutes from the flagship's position. Old wreckage from a battle fought centuries ago. We fly through it, let the debris mask our signature. Then we send a small team through their maintenance hatch. In and out, before they know what happened." Tai Wu shook his head slowly. "A small team against 3,000 soldiers." 4 people, Sujin said, "are best. Fast and quiet. They get our man, and they get out. No heroics. No fighting unless necessary." The team was assembled within the hour. They gathered in the cargo bay, checking their weapons and equipment. Sujin came to speak with them personally. Sergeant Murray was the team leader. She was a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had fought in 3 wars and survived wounds that should have killed her twice. She did not speak much, but when she gave orders, people obeyed. Beside her was Jun-Soo, the demolitions expert. He was loud and cheerful and never stopped talking. He had a joke for every situation, a smile for every danger. Some people thought he was crazy. Sujin knew he was just coping. Youngji was the medic. She was small and quiet, with gentle hands and sad eyes. No one knew her story, but everyone knew she had one. She never spoke about her past. She just did her job and saved lives. The last member was Hyun-woo. He was 23 years old, fresh from training, and absolutely terrified. His hands shook as he checked his weapon. This was his first real mission. Sujin stopped in front of him. "Scared?" she asked. Hyun-woo nodded. "He did not try to hide it," good Sujin said. "Fear keeps you alive. Use it. Let it make you careful." She put a hand on his shoulder. "You were chosen for this team because you are good. Trust your training. Trust your people. You will be fine." Hyun-woo took a deep breath. "Yes, Captain." The defiant hope moved through space like a ghost. They entered the debris field slowly, carefully, letting the chunks of ancient metal hide their presence. On the bridge, GA monitored the Valoran flagship's sensors. So far, they had not been detected. Approaching drop point, the pilot announced. Sujin opened a channel to the cargo bay. "Murray, you are clear to launch." In the bay, Murray checked her team one last time. "Remember the plan. Fast and quiet. We get in, we find him, we get out. No unnecessary risks." She looked at each of them. "If something goes wrong, we adapt. Humans are good at adapting. It is what we do." The airlock opened. Space stretched out before them, cold and endless and full of stars. They jumped. The flight to the eternal silence took 8 minutes. 8 minutes of floating through the void, watching the massive warship grow larger and larger. Hyun-woo felt his heart beating so hard he thought it might explode. He focused on his breathing. In and out. In and out. The maintenance hatch was exactly where intelligence said it would be. Jun-Soo worked on the lock while the others kept watch. 30 seconds later, they were inside. The corridors of the Valoran ship were cold and sterile. Everything was metal and harsh light. No decoration, no color. It felt like being inside a machine. Mireille led them forward, her weapon ready. They moved in silence, communicating with hand signals. Left. Right. Stop. Move. They passed 2 guards without being seen. Pressing themselves into shadows until the danger passed, the detention block was on level 7. They took a service elevator, Yunji, watching the ceiling while the others covered the door. When it opened, they found themselves in a long corridor with cells on either side. Most of the cells were empty, but at the end of the hall, behind a barrier of blue energy, someone was lying on the floor. Mireille approached slowly. She looked through the barrier and saw what the Valorans had done to the man inside. His face was swollen and bruised. His arms were covered in burns. His body was thin from lack of food, but he was alive. And when he heard footsteps, he opened his eyes. "About time," Doan said. His voice was weak but steady. I was starting to think no one was coming. Mireille felt something cold settle in her chest. Anger, pure and focused. "We're here now. Can you walk?" Doan pushed himself up slowly. Every movement clearly caused him pain, but he stood. He walked to the barrier. "Can I walk?" He almost laughed. "I can run." Junsu placed a small device on the barrier controls. 3 seconds later, the energy field flickered and died. Yoongi rushed forward to check Doan's injuries. Her face was tight with professional concern. Multiple fractures. Internal bleeding. Severe dehydration. She looked at Mireille. "He needs a medical bay." "Now? Then let's move," Mireille said. They were halfway back to the maintenance hatch when the alarms started. Red light flooded the corridors. A voice announced in Valoran that there were intruders on board. Security teams were being deployed. "So much for quiet," Jensu said. Mireille did not hesitate. "New plan. We fight our way out." She handed Doan a spare weapon. "Can you use this?" Doan took the weapon. His hands were shaking, but his grip was firm. "Let's find out." The first Valoran soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor. Mireille raised her weapon and fired. The battle had begun. Admiral Kira watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of the Eternal. Silence. Red lights flashed on every console. Officers shouted reports that made no sense. On the main screen, security footage showed 5 small figures cutting through her soldiers like a blade through water. 5 humans. "Only 5? How did they get on board?" she demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. They appear to have entered through a maintenance hatch in Sector 12. They send all available security teams. Seal every exit. I want them captured or killed." The orders went out. 300 soldiers moved to intercept. Admiral Kira expected the battle to be over in minutes. She was wrong. In the corridors of her ship, Sergeant Mireille was moving like death itself. Her weapon fired in short, controlled bursts. Every shot hit its target. Every movement was precise and purposeful. She had been fighting for 20 years, and her body knew what to do without her mind having to think. Behind her, Junsu laughed as he planted charges on doors and walls. The explosions were small but effective, creating barriers of flame and debris that slowed the Valoran pursuit. "You know," he said between blasts, "I'm actually enjoying this." "You're insane," Hyunwoo gasped. He was pressed against a wall, firing at shadows, his hands shaking badly. This was nothing like training. This was real. People were dying, B. Jensu admitted. But it keeps things interesting. Yeonji moved through the team like a shadow, checking injuries, distributing medication, keeping everyone alive. She did not speak, but her presence was calming. When Hyunwoo started to panic, she put a hand on his shoulder and looked into his eyes. He breathed. He steadied. He kept fighting, and Dohan, despite everything, despite his broken body and exhausted mind, fought beside them. He moved slowly, painfully, but he moved. His shots were not as precise as Morae's, not as confident as Junsu's, but every time a Valoran soldier appeared in his sights, he pulled the trigger. 2 weeks of torture had not broken him. 2 weeks of darkness had not killed his spirit. He was still fighting. He would always be fighting. On the bridge, Admiral Kira received reports that she did not want to believe. We have lost contact with Security Team 7. Team 12 is not responding. Admiral, we have confirmed casualties. 47 soldiers. The intruders have lost none. Kira stared at the screen. The 5 humans were still moving, still fighting, still alive. How was this possible? Her soldiers outnumbered them hundreds to 1. Her soldiers had better weapons, better training, better equipment, and yet they were dying while the humans kept coming. Yuna stood in the corner of the bridge, watching with wide eyes. She had read about humans. She had studied their biology, their history, their strange and violent past. But reading about something and seeing it were very different things. These humans were not stronger than Valorans. Their weapons were not superior. They were not faster or smarter or better equipped. But they fought like nothing she had ever seen. They fought without hesitation, without doubt, without fear. They fought for each other. When Junsu was hit in the shoulder, Yunji dragged him to cover, while Mireille provided suppressing fire. When Hunwoo froze in terror, Doan grabbed his arm and pulled him forward, shouting encouragement. When the path ahead was blocked, they found another way. When that way was blocked too, they made a new path with explosives and determination. They were not fighting to win. They knew they could not win. They were fighting to survive. They were fighting to escape. They were fighting because giving up was not something humans knew how to do. The footage would be studied for generations. Tactical officers would analyze every movement, every decision, every impossible moment when the humans should have died but didn't. They would try to understand what made these creatures so dangerous. They would fail, because the secret was not in their tactics. It was not in their training. It was in something deeper, something the Valorans had removed from their own biology centuries ago. It was heart. Humans had heart. They loved. They hated. They felt fear and pushed through it. They felt pain and ignored it. They looked at impossible odds and said, maybe, let's try. Admiral Kira watched a human soldier take 3 hits from Valoran weapons and keep moving. She watched another human carry a wounded comrade while firing with one hand. She watched Doan the prisoner, the man they had tortured for 2 weeks, pick up a fallen weapon and keep fighting despite having every reason to lie down and die. Admiral, an officer said quietly. They are approaching Airlock 17. Their ship is waiting outside. Kira considered her options. She could send more soldiers. She could seal the airlock. She could activate the ship's internal defenses and flood the corridors with gas, or she could let them go. Captain Sujin's voice crackled through the communication system. The human had hacked into their frequency. Admiral Kira, I presume. Kira activated the response channel. You have invaded my ship. You have killed my soldiers. You will not escape. We came for our people, Sujin said. Her voice was calm, professional, almost polite. We have him now. We are leaving. This does not have to continue. You think I will simply let you go? I think you are smart enough to count the cost. How many more soldiers do you want to lose? How many more reports do you want to file? We did not come here for war. We came for one man. Let us take him home, and this ends. Keep fighting, and more of your people will die. The bridge was silent. Every officer watched their admiral waiting for her command. Kira thought about the footage she had seen. 47 dead. 0 human casualties. The humans were almost at the airlock now. If she wanted to stop them, she would have to send more soldiers. And more would die. Her pride screamed for vengeance. Her logic whispered a warning. She had read about human history. She knew what happened when their enemies pushed too hard. She knew about their world wars, their nuclear weapons, their capacity for destruction. If she killed these 5 humans, more would come. And more after that. Humans did not forget. Humans did not forgive. Humans held grudges across generations. Was one prisoner worth starting that kind of war? Stand down, she said quietly. The bridge officer stared at her. Admiral. Stand down, she repeated. Let them go. On the security footage, she watched the 5 humans reach the airlock. She watched them board their small ship. She watched the ship pull away from the eternal silence and disappear into the darkness of space. The battle was over. The humans had won. And Admiral Kira, for the first time in her long career, understood what it meant to be truly afraid of another species. The Valoran Empire tried to keep the incident secret. They classified all records. They swore every witness to silence. They erased the footage and buried the reports. But secrets do not stay buried in a galaxy full of spies, traitors, and loose tongues. Within weeks, the story spread to the Kirathi Federation. Within months, the Nomari Collective knew every detail. By the end of the year, even the isolated 1,000 clans of the Outer Rim were whispering about the humans. 5 of them. Only 5. They had boarded the most powerful warship in the Valoran fleet. They had killed 47 soldiers. They had rescued their captured pilot. And they had escaped without losing a single person. But the numbers were not what made the story famous. The numbers were impressive, yes, but what captured the imagination of 100 different species was something else entirely. The humans had not wanted war. They had not invaded to conquer. They had not killed for glory or territory or revenge. They had come for one person. One single human being. And they had crossed space, risked their lives, fought through an army. Just to bring him home, species across the galaxy began to ask the same question. What kind of people would do that? What kind of loyalty drove them? What kind of love? And when they searched for answers, when they looked into human history and human culture and human nature, they found something that terrified them. Humans came from a death world. Their planet was full of dangers that would kill most species in days. They'd survived by adapting, by fighting, by refusing to give up. They had fought each other for thousands of years, developing weapons and tactics that no other species had imagined. They had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times. And every time they had rebuilt, but they had also done something else. They had created art, music, poetry. They had written stories about heroes who sacrificed everything for strangers. They had built societies based on strange concepts like justice and freedom and hope. They believed in something called the future, a time when things would be better. And they worked toward that future even when the present was dark. Humans were not just dangerous. They were something more. Something the galaxy had never seen. They were hopeful killers, loving warriors, creatures who could burn worlds and then weep over a dead flower. The galactic powers held meetings. They discussed what to do about humanity. Some argued for attack, for destroying the threat before it could grow. Others argued for alliance, for bringing humans into the fold before they became enemies. A few suggested simply leaving them alone and hoping they never looked outward with hungry eyes. In the end, it was the Nomari who made the first move. They sent an ambassador to Earth with gifts and offers of friendship. The humans accepted cautiously. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges began. And slowly, very slowly, humanity took its place among the stars. 3 years after the incident on the Eternal Silence, the Treaty of Soul was signed. 27 species agreed to recognize Earth and its colonies as sovereign territory. In return, humans agreed to certain limits on their expansion, certain rules of engagement, certain promises of peace. But everyone knew the truth behind the treaty. It was not about limits or rules or promises. It was about fear. The galaxy was afraid of what humans might become if they were pushed. The galaxy had seen what 5 of them could do. They did not want to see what 5 billion could do. Doan returned to Earth for recovery. His body healed slowly. The doctors said he would always have scars, inside and out. But he was alive. He was home. And every morning when he woke up in his own bed, in his own apartment, in his own city, he remembered why someone had come for him. 6 months after his rescue, he had a visitor. She arrived at his door without warning, a tall figure in strange clothes, with gray skin and 4 eyes. It took him a moment to recognize her. "Una," he said. "I didn't expect to see you again." Una stood awkwardly in his doorway. She had left the Valoran Empire 3 months ago, unable to stay after everything she had learned. She had traveled across the galaxy searching for something she could not name. And somehow, her journey had brought her here. "I needed to understand," she said. "Your people, your species. I have read everything about you. I have studied your history and your culture and your biology. But I still do not understand." Doan looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped aside and gestured into his apartment. "Come in," he said. "I'll make tea. And I'll tell you about a little thing we call hope." They talked for hours. Doan told her about his childhood, about his family, about the grandmother who really did hit harder than Valoran soldiers. He told her about Earth, about its beauty and its flaws, about the way humans kept trying to make it better even when everything seemed hopeless. He told her about the crew of the Defiant. Hope, Captain Sujin, had retired last year and opened a school for young diplomats. Taiwu was an ambassador now, traveling between worlds, building bridges. Murray trained new soldiers, teaching them not just how to fight, but why to fight. Yonji had finally started speaking again, and her words had become poetry that made people weep. Junsu still talked too much, but now he made people laugh instead of nervous. And Hunhua was not scared anymore. "Came for me," Doan said. "They did not know me. They had no reason to risk their lives. But they came anyway, because that is what humans do. We do not leave our people behind. Ever." Una listened. And for the first time in her life, she understood something that logic could never explain. Love was not weakness. Feeling was not failure. The things that the Valorans had removed from themselves were not flaws to be corrected. They were strengths. They were the greatest strengths of all. She stayed on Earth. She studied humanity not as a scientist, but as a friend. And slowly, she began to feel something she had never felt before: hope across the galaxy. The story of Doan's rescue became legend. Parents told it to their children. Teachers taught it in schools. A saying spread from species to species, from world to world, until everyone knew it. Never take a human prisoner. Never threaten their families. Never harm their people. Because humans do not forget. Humans do not give up. Humans will cross the entire galaxy to bring their people home. And if you make them your enemy, if you push them too far, if you give them a reason to fight, they will burn everything you have ever built and plant flowers in the ashes. But if you treat them with kindness, if you earn their trust, if you become their friend, they will stand beside you against any darkness. They will fight for you. They will die for you. They will hope for you when you have forgotten how to hope, because that is what humans do, in his apartment on Earth. Doan looked out the window at the city below. Ships flew overhead, carrying humans and aliens alike. The future his ancestors had dreamed of was finally here. He touched the scar on his face, the one the Valorans had given him. It would never fully heal. Some wounds never did. But he was still here. Still breathing, still hoping, and somewhere out there, he knew someone else was waiting to be rescued. Someone else was alone in the dark, praying for help. When that call came, humans would answer. They always did.